What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of F1 Fantasy Pole Position. It is Monday, November 3rd. My name is Ewan. On today's episode, I'm going to give you my transfer targets for the Brazilian Grand Prix, the São Paulo Grand Prix, whatever you want to call it. It is race week. It is Brazil. It is one of the best tracks on the calendar, and I am very excited for this sprint weekend. Just as an F1 fan and an F1 fantasy manager in general, it's going to be fantastic. I am very excited. Hopefully you are too. And if you are liking what you're seeing on the YouTube channel, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We are getting closer and closer to our goal of 4,000 subs. And also shout out to Formula Fantasy Hub for challenging us, kind of throwing it down to the F1 Fantasy Pole Position YouTube channel for the likes challenge. So Rob was kind of catching on to what we do here, where I challenge you guys to give me 150 likes on every video, which you guys are absolutely crushing. And he kind of challenged his viewers to beat that, and they did crush it at 300. Now, I'm not expecting 300 likes, but we can compete with Rob. So I think we can do a pretty good job. So just remember to give that video a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Greatly appreciate it. But there is a lot to get into here, so I'm not even going to go through all the promos that I usually do. So let's just get into it. Starting off with a quick update on the weather. Saturday and Sunday have kind of switched around from my team selection video, which you can check out right in the top right-hand corner right now. I'll put a little link thingy there. So yeah, mostly cloudy on Friday, but it's going to be hot. 29 degrees Celsius, 84 degrees Fahrenheit, 55% chance of rain. Hopefully it stays away from the practice so we can get some representative data there. Saturday gets a lot colder, however. So for the qualifying and the sprint race, it might be a little bit of a cooler Saturday. This is from AccuWeather.com as of Sunday, November 2nd. Just a heads up on that. 55% chance of rain there. And then Sunday, it's kind of a in between Friday and Saturday there. 23 degrees Celsius, 73 degrees Fahrenheit. So it doesn't look like it's going to be like crazy thunderstormy all weekend long. However, it's Brazil. We're just going to have to check this weather up until the deadline, which I will be back for 2 hours before the deadline stream with the Brazil sprint. Yeah, so 2 p.m. UK time, 9 a.m. US Eastern. I will be here on YouTube for 2 hours to discuss your F1 fantasy questions and lineup concerns. All right, let's get into it here. Spinning in the rain. I did this a couple of races ago for the Singapore Grand Prix where I did the DNF concerns, but because Brazil is going to be wet, we do need to kind of ask like how people are doing in the wet versus the dry. This is the entire grid on the board. So we got Albon, Alonso, Antonelli, Bearman, blah, 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 blah. Let's check out a couple that are really notable. So Alonso, 3.2 in the dry, negative 9.7 in the wet. It's been rough there for him. Bortoleto, 7.4 in the dry, negative 16.3 in the wet. Hadjar as well, 7.2, negative 13.3. Lawson, 4.1 in the dry, negative 17 in the wet. If you're listening on the podcast side, tune on over to the YouTube channel, F1 Fantasy Pole Position, and check this entire table out for yourself. I'll post this on X later in the week just so you guys can see it all. Signs as well, 5.2 in the dry, negative 6.7 points per race in the wet. The races I'm using for the wet races are Australia, the UK, and then what was the other one? Miami. So those are the three that I'm classing as wet races this season. Lando Norris, 27.2 points per race in the dry and 50.3 in the wet. So that's something we have to look out for as well if we don't have Lando Norris in our squad. However, I put out the call to y'all on X that ask me any questions for the transfer targets. And Taylor said, definitely need to consider who's had the strongest wet weather drives this year and last year of all races. Any analysis and stats would be super interesting. Alpine very lucky last year in Brazil, but both of the drivers keep their car on the racetrack, which was impressive. And I agree, Taylor, it was impressive. And as you can see here, Pierre Gasly is averaging negative 0.1 points per race in the dry this season, but 11.3 in the wet. So that's something we need to consider. Also, you kind of noticed there that I was talking about Bortoleto, I was talking about Hadjar, I was talking about Alonso, who was saying he was a rookie, but is not a rookie, obviously. Bortoleto, Colapinto, Hadjar, all struggling. Lawson as well. So check out this slide here. Experience is key. In the dry races of this season, rookies are averaging 7.02 points per race. The rest of the grid is averaging 13.05. So, you've got more experienced drivers on the grid. You've got most of the drivers with more experience are in better cars, so they are going to score more. That makes sense. But in the wet, negative 8.93 points per race for rookies in F1 Fantasy this season. That is Not great, Bob. And then the rest of the grid is 15.9 points per race in the wet. So it's going to be kind of a talking point this week. You got to watch out. Try to avoid these rookies because we are getting to tracks where they haven't had a lot of experience in F2 and F3. There's not a lot of running there, mostly European circuits for those junior formulas. And it's going to hurt. But Gabriel Bortoleto, it is his home race, but he has been poor in the wet. But I kind of want to hold on to him, as you're going to see in the transfer targets here in a little bit. But yeah, rookies, 7.02 points per race in the dry, negative 8.93 points per race in the wet. That is something we are going to have to watch this weekend. Back of the pack, so now we're getting into the transfer targets. Back of the pack here, wanted to touch on Alpine a little bit here. Not a lot, but they are doing okay. Points for a good price rise for Franco Colapinto, 2 and 6. Points for a good price rise and a great price rise for Pierre Gasly, 1 and 5. Gasly's in 51.6% of teams. Franco Colapinto's in 28.8% of teams. They're both 4.7. They both might go up again. They might be the same price as Fernando Alonso after this weekend's race, which is wild. As you can see here, Franco Colapinto in quali/race average over the last 3, he is averaging 17th in quali, but is going up to 16.3 in the race. And Pierre Gasly is 16.7 and goes down to 17.7 in the race. Really not a lot to go between either of these guys. If you were on wildcard, I think the fact that Gasly has been doing okay in the wet, coming off a podium here in Brazil last year, which was like due to outside circumstances, obviously, but I think I would roll with Gasly. However, if you have Colapinto and you don't have Gasly, I would not be using a transfer on either of these guys to like flip and flop. As you can see, they're very close to each other in like points for good price rise, points for a great price rise, and they could both just DNF quite easily. And like you're back down to 4.5 million, but that is what it is. So if you're kind of protecting rank, then maybe go with Gasly because 51.6% of the global top 500 have Pierre Gasly already. And if you are somehow chasing and you think Colapinto is due for a South American boost being at the Brazilian Grand Prix, then 28.8%, slightly less, but I wouldn't worry too much about the back of the pack with Alpine. So just wanted to touch on them though. Like I wouldn't use a transfer to flip or flop between either of them. This is the price follows here. Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso. And shout out again to Formula Fantasy Hub. Thank you, Rob, for kind of mentioning that despite Fernando Alonso needing 46 points for a good price rise and 51 points for a great price rise, could he be worth it to take the price hit on the chin and potentially chase some points? We are 4 races to go in the 2025 F1 Fantasy season, and Fernando Alonso has been around Brazil more times than I don't even know how many times Zlatan Ibrahimovic has changed football teams. So Alonso is kind of interesting to me this week. He's 5.5 million. He's going to go down to 4.9 million next weekend for the following race in Las Vegas, which may not be so good for Aston Martin. However, if you're chasing points, the Brazilian Grand Prix, it's kind of like it doesn't have all the high-speed corners that kind of plague Aston Martin. It's a little similar to like Hungary and Zandvoort, and a little kind of that could suit the Aston Martin a little bit better than the high-speed tracks and the long straights that we're going to see for the remainder of the season. So it could be time to play Fernando Alonso and kind of chase those points if Aston Martin look half decent in practice and qualifying on Friday. Carlos Sainz is a little bit different for me. As you can see here, over the last 6 races, 1 point in the Netherlands, 3 points in Italy, a spike week in Azerbaijan, 8 points in Singapore, -3 in USA, and 6 in Mexico. So we haven't had anything phenomenal from the Spanish driver here, but he needs 15 points for a good price rise, 20 points for a great price rise. I don't know how well Williams is going to go around here. There's like that one long straight, like by the grandstand at the start finish line. So maybe they can do stuff, but I don't know how well-rounded the car will be for the rest. I mean, they've turned off development for 2026, so I'm not sure how well they'll be set up for the rest of the sectors there, but Carlos Sainz, 6.3 million. I'm not sure if I would, I'm not sure if I would go with another transfer to kind of flip or flop between these guys, depending on who you have. I think I'm going to try and get Carlos Sainz out of my squad. He's in there right now, 6.3 million. Fell 0.6 last week at the Mexico Grand Prix, which was not great, unfortunately. He was a couple points off of a 0.2 fall. But just wanted to touch on the price follows. They are pretty popular in F1 Fantasy. As you can see, Carlos Sainz is in 71.6% of the global top 500. I believe he's the second most owned asset in that group. And Alonso's at 32.2%. But shout out to Formula Fantasy Hub Rob for kind of bringing that to my attention. So I want to touch on it as well, because it's a great point that Alonso may actually still be a good points chasing option for us in F1 Fantasy this week at the São Paulo Grand Prix. Going over to the Killer Bees, Ollie Bearman and Gabriel Bortoleto. Now, these guys are kind of the opposite of Alonso and Carlos Sainz here. They are rookies, but however, we have to remember that Bearman did compete here last year. So Kevin Magnussen was sick at the 2024 Brazilian Grand Prix, and Ollie Bearman stepped in for Haas. So he's had a little bit, he made it through the whole race. He kind of went through like some learning curves there. Like I believe he was off the track like 3, 4, 5 times during that crazy race last season. But he's 8.3 million now in 9.8% of the global top 500. I don't think it's going to stick that low. So if you're looking for a differential, Ollie Bearman is probably not going to be a differential after this weekend. We'll see how many teams can actually get up to him at the end of the day, just depending on how sprint qualifying and practice goes. But 18.7 points per race over the last 3 races, 2.49 points per million. He's been qualifying 9th on average over the last 3 and finishing 7.3. Points for good price rise, -27. Points for great price rise, -20. So one of the easier budget risers if you are still in that game, which it may be time to turn towards point scoring with 4 races to go. I would highly advise that. But Ollie Bearman is not a bad kind of option for that either. As you can see, 27 points in the Netherlands, 366 at the next 3 races, but 14 points in Austin, 36 points in Mexico City. So Ollie Bearman seems to be growing into his own, kind of stamping his authority. He's got F1.com putting out articles like, is he the heir apparent to Lewis Hamilton? And the vibes are good around Haas. They brought an update to Austin, and it seems to be going okay. Moving over to Gabby Bortoleto here. He's 1 million less than Ollie Bearman, so that's a little bit more interesting. 7.3 million, 49.2% of the global top 500 have the Brazilian in their F1 Fantasy squad. 9.3 points per million, 1.47 points per 9.3 points per race, 1.47 points per million. 15th in quality average, 15th in racing average, but he's had some good recovery drives here. 17 points at the Austin sprints, 12 points in Mexico, -9 points for a good price rise, -2 points for a great price rise. So with the elevated odds of a driver of the day, like I reckon if he makes up enough spots or qualifies in the top 10 and finishes in the top 10, I think Gabby Bortoleto will be on for driver of the day. But it's always hard to kind of go with guessing that. But just as of Monday, I would say Bortoleto has the best odds. It's his home race. It's the first time a Brazilian has raced here for a little bit. So the crowd will be with him. The votes will be with him. And it might be an okay option to keep Gabby Bortoleto in your squad. But both of these options, Ollie Bearman and Gabby Bortoleto, are excellent F1 Fantasy options for the Brazilian Grand Prix. Going over to the light drivers here, we've had Kimi Antonelli and we've had Yuki Tsunoda, and we got another audience question coming up here, if I can remember. I believe I missed one about Carlos Sainz, but as we got here, probably already on the agenda, but Antonelli, says Avon Cry. Yeah. Antonelli, 16.3 million. He's in 21.8% of the global top 500, 19.7 points per race, 1.29 points per million. Doing okay. You don't love to see that he qualifies high and finishes low, but he did get hit in Austin, so that's a little bit unfortunate there. As you can see, he's been growing in stature and confidence in F1 and F1 Fantasy since he left the European circuit. 1 point in the Netherlands, 6 points at Monza at his home race, and then 22, 17, 22, and 20 for Kimi Antonelli. So he's been on the rise. 2.2 million away from getting to A-tier status. I don't think we're going to get there in 2025, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. 2 points for a good price rise, 17 points for a great price rise. Well within his grasp, especially at Brazil. It's a sprint weekend, but he is a rookie, and with the wet weather, he brings a little bit of a risk. 16.3 is also just like an awkward price point. If you are one of those F1 fantasy managers that is in like a 3A build, but has like this odd amount where it's like less than 20 million, but not close enough to get to a Ferrari or a George Russell as your like fourth A-tier asset, Kimi Antonelli is a perfectly fine asset. If we look at Yuki Tsunoda, however, 10.8 million, so like 5.5 million less than Antonelli, which is really nice. 14.7 points per race over the last three, 1.52 points per million. Quali and race average, kind of the opposite of Antonelli. He's been like qualifying lower and finishing higher, so that's nice. Negative 10 points for a good price rise, negative 1 point for a great price rise. Still clinging on to that 37 points in Austin for one more race. However, once we get to Vegas and Qatar, it will be a struggle for Yuki Tsunoda to rise, whereas Kimi Antonelli might have a better shot. 22 points in the States, 20 points in Mexico. Whatever he scores this weekend in Brazil will be good enough for him to probably keep rising. So if you're trying to get those bigger gains like long term to get to like a 4A by Abu Dhabi, then I'd probably back Kimi Antonelli over Yuki Tsunoda. We'll need to see how these cars react in Brazil. Like there's the kind of myth or old adage that Mercedes is good here, but that hasn't kind of proven out over the last couple of seasons. Shout out to y'all that called me out for that in the team selection video last week. I appreciate you guys keeping me honest. And Red Bull, Max has done really well here. I believe he's won 4 out of the last 5 Brazilian Grand Prix, so not bad at all for Red Bull. And maybe Yuki Tsunoda can harness that. People seem to think that he is growing in the car as the season draws to an end. I mean, Red Bull have delayed their driver announcement for 2026. I think it's because Yuki's doing okay. I still don't think he has a shot. He's also kind of taken a hit in regards to like spaces left on the grid because Aston Martin announced earlier last week that Jack Crawford is going to be their third driver, their reserve driver for 2026. So I kind of thought that Yuki could be a shout for that role, like a Valtteri Bottas to Aston Martin for 2026. But maybe this will focus him or maybe it will make him more nervous. I'm not entirely sure. So I don't love either of these options. Kimi Antonelli would be preferred, like just in a vacuum, like no price or whatever, because he's driving a lot better. Like I said, 22 points in Azerbaijan, 17 in Singapore, 22 in USA, and 20 points in Mexico. So that's pretty nice for the Italian driver. Yuki Tsunoda, those 37 points in Austin are going to drop off of his 3-race rolling average very soon. So it may be like kind of like bring him in for 1 week. Maybe he does well. Maybe you can hold on to him. Maybe he boosts you up with like another 15, 20 points here because it's sprint weekend and you can hold, but the 10 million, maybe you can make that work a little bit better. Like I think I'd go with Ollie Bearman over Yuki Tsunoda. In fact, I know I would, because here are the tier B transfer target rankings. So I've got in order here, Bearman, Antonelli, Bortoleto, Tsunoda, Alonso, Sainz, Gasly, Colapinto. Right now, Bortoleto, Sainz, and Gasly are in my team. I want Ollie Bearman in my team. That is incorrect tick mark. I forgot to change that there. Sorry, I flipped them at the last second before I started doing this episode. So I want Bearman in my team, not Antonelli. I don't not want Antonelli in my team, but I just have enough budget that I can get to a 4A lineup. Alonso is kind of a wait and see. If I see something in practice or sprint qualifying, then I may consider bringing him into the squad, which will be quite nice. Sainz and Gasly I have in the squad. I don't not want them in, but I'd love to get them out. Especially if I could improve Gasly to like another, like if I could go Gasly to Alonso with some leftover budget, that would be quite nice. I'd be willing to take that hit. And then that way it would be like a sideways move for Vegas, depending on what it looks like. Because then Alonso's probably going to be 4.9 and Gasly might be 4.9. So you wouldn't have to worry about maybe getting priced out of an Alpine asset, which is not something I thought I'd be saying in 2025 F1 Fantasy. But Bearman is 1, Antonelli 2, and Bortoleto is 3. I'd like Bearman and Bortoleto in my squad. I can get there, but check out my team selection video, like I said earlier, to kind of break that all down. Alrighty, so choosing the correct constructor is one of the bigger topics in F1 Fantasy right now as well. So that's where I'm going to end the kind of transfer topics here. We had a question, let me find it here, from F1 Fantasy Fuel, who did a great loosey-goosey math impersonation on X. You should go find that thread. I believe I reposted it as well, talking about the wet, or the drivers in the wet, like what they've been scoring, all that fun stuff. He's saying, Red Bull, wondering if it might be worth the extra $3 million compared to Mercedes if you need a bit more Supermax coverage. So right now I have Red Bull in my squad. It did not go too well in Mexico, but, you know, Max didn't win. Yuki kind of got a 12-second pit stop, so, like, not ideal. But On the screen right now, I've got 4 columns. I've got PPR for the season, points per million for the season, PPR for the last 6, and points per million for the last 6. So let's go team by team, and then we will break it all down. So McLaren is averaging 77.1 points per race this season, 2.37 points per million. Over the last 6, it's dropped down about 23-ish points to 54.5 points per race, and then 1.56 points per million. So not bad, but not as good as it has been for most of the season. Ferrari here, 49.8 points per race, 1.72 points per million, 47 points per race over the last 6. So they're kind of similar over the course of the season, and they're up at 1.53 points per million now. So they're less points per million than McLaren. Red Bull is really the big difference maker over the last 6 races as Max Verstappen has risen and has started to challenge for the F1 title to go 5 in a row. Red Bull was at 46.8 for the season and 1.7 points per million for the season, but over the last 6 races, 61.2 points per race and 2.1 points per million over the last 6. So they've been the best bang for your buck option since the summer break. Mercedes here, 46.3, 1.86 points per million, 41 points per race over the last 6, and 2.01. So Mercedes has been more valuable bang for your buck than McLaren and Ferrari since the summer break, which is quite interesting. So right now I have McLaren and Red Bull. Ferrari's not really in my thoughts because I think they are too expensive for me right now to like sacrifice other areas of my team. So they're not really in my thoughts. However, I did rank them all here. So I've got McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari. That's how I rank them. McLaren 1, Red Bull 2, Mercedes 3, Ferrari 4. Ferrari are penalized because of their kind of just cost. They're in a weird spot right now. But if they show up in practice, I will think about bringing them in and sacrificing some of my drivers to get Ferrari in. Red Bull and Mercedes, that's kind of closer for me. I think I'm going to keep McLaren no matter what. They should do quite well around Brazil. We'll keep an eye on the weather. If it rains quite a lot, I think I'll be going with Red Bull just for the ceiling that Max Verstappen offers in the wet. And with Antonelli being part of Mercedes, that makes me a little bit more nervous. So there's a area where I can just keep with McLaren and Red Bull and kind of move other assets around to get whoever I want at B tier or A tier kind of thing. I've got Max right now with Leclerc. I can get to George Russell in one move. So if I want some Mercedes coverage, I could keep Red Bull and McLaren as my constructor and just get George Russell in and avoid having any ties to Kimi Antonelli, the rookie, for this weekend. It's going to be really close and it's going to be like a deadline decision. So don't forget to join me for the deadline 2 hours before lineup lock on Saturday. I'm realizing right now that I did not edit this slide either. So it's not the Singapore quali, it's the Brazil sprint that's going to be at 2 p.m. UK time, 9 a.m. US Eastern on Saturday, November 8th. So hopefully I will see you guys there. But that's going to do it for today's Transfer Targets episode. Hopefully it all kind of looked okay. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Just a little heads up that I posted a video last Friday. It was a October driver power rankings, and it was a member preview. And I forgot to do an intro. I just kind of posted it out there, but that was just a preview of what you guys can get if you join the YouTube membership or the Patreon program that I have been touting. So it's like a cup of coffee a month. You get in the Discord with me for live kind of chat alongs about sprints, about free practices, all that fun stuff. So I'm in there. So don't forget to sign up. The link is in the description below if you would like to get some more loosey-goosey maths in your life. But yes, deadline live stream, Q&A stream, final thoughts, all coming out. Follow me on TikTok at F1FantasyU and follow me on X at F1FantasyU. And that's where I'm getting all my promos. And don't forget, if you sign up on Friday or Saturday for F1 Fantasy Tools, you can use promo code UN50 and you'll get the final 4 races of the 2025 F1 Fantasy season for 50% off to use F1 Fantasy Tools premium products. So if you want to sign up, test it out before 2026 rolls along, which is going to be quicker than we think. Give it a test. but start that membership on Saturday. That way you can get the most value for money out of it. But yes, transfer targets is done. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your decisions below, your lineup questions, your transfer targets, what you guys are thinking about, and hit me up on X as always. But once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next time.